Good morning, our viewers, and thank you for choosing Luntha Television. We have interrupted our normal Synod of Bishops, which is taking place today on the 13th of August 2024 in Kenya. And shortly we'll be crossing over to Nairobi, where the meeting is being hosted. Do stick around.
9th of July 2024. And of course, following the name Instrumentum Laboris, it's supposed to be a working document, a guiding document for the second session of the Synod of Bishops, which will take place in October of this year. If you recall very well, last year, the first section took place in Rome, and so the second session will take place in a few months' time in October. And so the itinerary of the document itself follows a suit. It begins with an introduction, and after that we have a part on foundations. And then we have the first part, which talks about relations. The second part talks about pathways. And the third part talks about places before the conclusion. For today's section, for this session today, I will suggest that we focus mainly on the introduction and the foundations. In fact, the foundations are very, very important. As we know, when the foundations are not in order, the structure becomes problematic. So I want us to focus on the introduction of this document, and also the foundation, the part on foundation. The part 1, the part 2, and the part 3, I wouldn't say they are repetitions of what we find, or what is written in the foundations, but you could see that some of the themes treated in the foundations, you see them again in each of those parts, but now elaborately treated. So it will be very important to have at least the basics to read these other 3 parts. And so I will ask us to please, let's focus on the introduction and foundations today. And then next month when we meet, then we can do the part 1, the part 2, and the part 3. This way we even move faster. And so what is the introduction about? What is the introduction of this document about? The introduction itself is divided into 4 parts, which I've tried to summarize here. It's divided into 4 parts. The first is what I call synodality in biblical imagery. Synodality in biblical imagery. The second gives us a general understanding of synodality, what synodality is about. The third tells us what has been happening since we entered into this process of synodality. And so we're given, call it a synopsis of the synodal process thus far. And then the fourth part talks about the expectations of the second synod, that is what is to come in October. And so let's dive into it one after the other. Let's dive into it one after the other. So, the synodality in biblical imagery. At the beginning of this document, there is a quotation from Isaiah 25, 6-8. And this quotation seems very, very important. Very important in the sense that the imagery we got, or at least 2 images we got from this text, are those of mountain and festivity. And we want to ask ourselves, what is it about mountain and festivity? And this image of banquet at the mountain, how is it connected to synodality? I will first want us to look at the image of the mountain. And when you go through, especially the Old Testament, you will notice that the mountain is a place of encounter with the Lord. In fact, the very first time we are seeing mountain in the Bible is in the case of Noah. And if there is someone we want to call even a mountain climber, in fact, no one in the entire Old Testament climbed the mountain more than this person. And it is the person of Moses. And so the mountain indicates a place of encounter between the divine and the human. It's a place where we meet God, where we converse with God, where, there is that union between divinity and humanity. And so this document begins with that symbol of mountain, as alluded by Isaiah. But there is something special in Isaiah. This mountain isn't just a place, for instance, in the case of Moses, a place to go and get the law, or a place to go and seal up the covenant, But in Isaiah, it is a place of festivity, a place where people will come together to feast, to have banquets. And if we recall very well the experience of Elijah, when he ran away from Jezebel after killing the prophets of Baal, precisely in 1 Kings chapter 19, we were told that he was fed by the angels and then led to the mountain of God, Horeb. And so we already have this tradition of, call it banquet, on the mountain. And what does this festivity mean for us as a synodal church? It tells us about communion, about a sense of belonging, about togetherness. And interestingly, having the mountain and banquet together tells us that this togetherness, this communion, this festivity, or this belongingness isn't just among humans, but between God and humanity, and among humanity also. And so this document begins by giving us a true sense of synodality. That is, it must lead us to conviviality, it gives us a sense of hope, and it gives us an opportunity to express joy as against conflict. And so here, what we see from this image, or from this imagery, we see synodality implying relationship at the vertical level, that is our relationship with God. We also go to the mountain to seek this union with God. But at the same time, at the horizontal level, among ourselves, we need to be comfortable with each other for us to be in banquet together, for us to, be in communion together, for us to have a sense of belongingness. So we see that vertical and horizontal realm of synodality. And this we shall see, throughout the entire document. And so it's indeed very proper for this document to start or to begin with Isaiah 25, 6-8. A sense of hope that yes, synodality is a way of bringing all of us together. A way of bringing all of us together. And so let's quickly look at the second part of this introduction, which I have named Understanding Synodality itself. So it gives us really a general sense of what synodality is about, perhaps what we've always known. But this time around, I think the document, we don't want to take it for granted that everyone knows what synodality is about. And so it is important that this document begins by telling us, what is this synodality in general? And so the first thing we see in the document is to tell us the timeline for this process, that is from 2021 to 2024. And then it gives us also the theme of this, synod in synodality. That is for a synodal church: communion, participation, and mission. This we know already, but the document, we don't want to take it for granted. And then it reminds us again of the goal, which is the renewal of God's people in following the Lord and in the commitment to serving His mission. And the aspect of mission is really pronounced in this particular document. So, what is it about? It is about renewing ourselves as the people of God, which we see again in the Vatican II document, Lumen Gentium, defining the church first as the people of God. And so we need to understand first this identity and renew consistently this identity. And after that, we now commit ourselves to the mission of God Himself. And what is the rationale behind this whole synodality thing? What is the rationale? The first is our common baptismal identity. Common baptismal identity rooted in a diversity of contexts, but modeled after the Trinitarian unity. Which means what? It means by the virtue of our baptism, though different, though baptized in different places, we were all baptized, or we are all baptized in that Trinitarian formula, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. And when we profess that Trinitarian formula, basically we are testifying, we are witnessing to the unity of the Trinity. 3 persons, but one God. 3 persons, but one God. And that is also what synodality is about. The Father is not the Son is not the Spirit, but the Spirit is God, the Son is God, and the Father is God. 3 persons in one God. And that is what synodality is about. That is, though different, we are united. We are united. And so what unites us? The second rationale. That is, as baptized Christians, as baptized people, as people of God, we are united by our faith in that Trinitarian unity. So that unites us. And the second is that we are given the same mission. And as we hear in Matthew chapter 28, the very last verses of the Gospel of Matthew, go into the world, go into the nations, baptizing all men and women in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. And so, what will be the rationale behind this? Our faith brings us together. The mission we have received from God brings us together. And so, in this document, faith and mission are the basis, call it the rationale behind this whole idea of understanding our identity as the people of God, and at the same time, giving ourselves to the mission of God Himself. And so, the question we want to ask is, why synodality? Why do we want to practice synodality? Of course, we know this again, but the document we don't want to take it for granted. And so the document tells us why we have decided to adopt synodality as a way of proceeding. And by the way, what will be the etymology of synod, of synodality? What will be the etymology? It comes from the Greek, syn and odos. And when we see the syn basically means, something to come together, or to be together, to be with. And the odos basically means the way, the path. So being together on the way, journeying together. And the question now will be, why do we have to journey together? Why must we journey together? This document, we don't want to take it for granted that, we've been trying to explain the reason why we have to journey together. The document reiterates why, again, we have to journey together and why we are adopting synodality as a practice. And the first is so interesting, which is it has always been the nature of the church. It has always been the nature of the church. In fact, it is the true nature of the church. And this, we don't have to go far to understand. We only need to read the first chapters of the Acts of Apostles. And we will see that the early Christians, the first Christians, were always together. In fact, they received the Holy Spirit together. And they did things in common. We were told even in Acts of Apostles that they sell their things and they place them before the apostles for the good of the community. Again, we were told when there was strife, when their division, when their differences wanted to cause division, they brought the case to the apostles. And what happened? That led to the institution of deacons in the church. And so we could see that the very nature of the church is synodal, coming together, consulting one another, negotiating with one another. That is the nature of the church. And so it is a reminder that we need to go back to that very nature of the church. Again, our identity as a church has an inescapably communal dimension. The church has always been a community. In fact, when we read, for instance, the Gospel of Matthew, especially the part where we call the community discourse in the Gospel of Matthew, in most of the translations we have today, we see the word church, but the word itself is community, ecclesia, a gathering. And when you take it back even to the Hebrew tradition, kahal will mean what? An assembly, a gathering, community. You see, and so the church cannot escape from that reality that from its inception, we have always been a community. And a community means what? That we journey together, that we live together, that everyone has a sense of belonging. And so this document, we don't want to also take it for granted that we know this dimension of the church. It has to reiterate it. And this way, what do we see as a community? We understand that we are a community first of God's people, of the chosen people. In fact, it reminds us of one thing, very fundamental, that God is not just or is not limited to the individual. God is a God of people, is a God of community. And how do we understand this? We only have to go back, for instance, to Exodus chapter 19, verse 6. When God said to the chosen people of Israel, you will become to me a priestly kingdom. A kingdom requires what? People living together. A priestly kingdom and a holy nation. And that is what the church is about. A holy people, the people of God, a covenantal people. And we express this in community. And third, we notice that synodality is not simply a goal. In fact, at the end of this part, we will see that synodality is a means, not an end in itself. It's not a goal, but a journey to be accomplished together. What does it mean? It means that what we are journeying together. We are together in this. The goal, as I said, will be faith in God. It will be commitment to the mission of God. You see, but synodality helps us to get to what? To that salvific aspect of our lives. That is, we don't approach God individually alone. We also approach God as a community. And in fact, it's interesting when we walk out to God together. When we praise God together, not as individuals. And then the synodal journey connects us to the promise and the invitation of the Lord kept in the living tradition of the church. It means what? When we understand synodality very well, in fact, we are connected back to the beginning of the church and the entire tradition we have as church. And so it's not just about a sense of working together today or a sense of journeying together today, but we are journeying with the past, we are journeying with the present, we are journeying with the future. And if we want to even put it, it means we are in connection with the three tiers of the church: the church triumphant, the church militant, and the suffering church. That again is synodality in itself. And that is why at the celebration of every Mass, even the so-called private Mass, is not so private. Worship is a public affair. Again, God is a God of peoples. Although he may call individuals, in the case of Noah, in the case of Abraham, in the case of Moses, but if you notice, in the case of David also, but if you notice, all the covenant has a communal dimension. It isn't just a covenant with an individual. It is covenant with even descendants yet unborn. And that is why we say God of our fathers. And so this last part tells us that synodality isn't just among us present, it is also connections with the traditions of the church, the past and even the future church. And what will synodality, what should it kind of accomplish today? It must bring us to work together as men and women, and working especially in this crisis-laden world, to work for justice, to work for peace. To work for justice, to work for peace. And so the document then reiterated how we have engaged ourselves in this synodal process. Tells us first what this synodality is about, but then also introduces us to, our journey so far, the third part now of the introduction. And again, it begins by telling us when this whole thing started, the 9th to 10th of October, 2021. And then where it started. And interestingly, why we're so used to, things like this starting from maybe Rome and everything, it began in local churches worldwide. In parishes, in communities, in dioceses, even at the national and continental stages. You see? And so it began with the very nature of the church as people of God. So who are those invited to enter into the synodal process? Not the hierarchy alone, but the entire people of God, the church, in its true identity. And so it started in those places. And it started with what? With just one activity: listening to one another. Listening to one another. That, in fact, I would say is the catchword if we want to express the success of this synodal process. Listening, listening, listening. But then, beyond listening or having listened to one another, we also notice that that our stories are not the same, that our experiences are not the same. And then what do we see? After listening comes now the stage of continuous dialogue. And because we are in union with the church, with the Pope, of course, this dialogue isn't just dialogue among ourselves, but also dialogue with the General Secretariat of the Synod. And so there is now this back and forth understanding of what our faith means in our context and how to express our faith in our context. And so what have we gained so far? What have we gained so far? If nothing at all, the recognition and the enhancement of the church's rootedness in various contexts. So what that initial process helped us to understand is the fact that what? That the church is rooted in various contexts. And we must take each context. We must first recognize these contexts and take them really very serious. And so the document reminds us of how it has moved. And that will be the first stage so far, the first stage. At the second level, we now have the continental assemblies. That is the consequence of the first level. The first level was just in parishes, in communities, in dioceses, people talking about what they really wish this church should be, how this church should look like. Now, the second level is at the level of the continental, assemblies. In our case, SECAM actually has done great, I would say, because we have had several meetings at the level of SECAM. And here, it is now to discern together the main challenges challenges to fulfilling the mission present in these various contexts, in their particular context. So in the context of Africa, for instance, one of the major things emerging is the question of polygamy. And in fact, this document went ahead to mention it, that the African, conference or continent would want to look more into the question of polygamy. And this is serious also for mission. And I just give a simple example. Just imagine, we say the church is a church on mission. The church must evangelize the peripheries. And then we go now to these peripheries where people are practicing polygamy and they are okay with polygamy. And then you talk to them to convert to Christianity. Now, who do you actually want in the church? Is it the man and the wife alone or the entire family? And so at times we hear some of our people saying, you know what, you come and marry only one wife in the church. Have we really helped that family at the level of mission? Because you've converted not just the head of the family, you've converted the entire family. And then you finish with this conversion, this person embraced Catholicism, and then you say, no, you cannot receive communion because you have 3, 4 wives. So why have we gone in the first place to bring this person to the church if we know that this person will not be in full communion with us? Because he has 3 or 4 wives before knowing even Christ or before becoming a Christian. How do we solve issues like this? What should we do in responding to concrete situations like this, which we meet in mission field or mission fields? What should we do? And so you see that now at the level of the continental assemblies, it is now time for people to come together, for the continent to come together and say, these are peculiar problems to our context affecting the nation. How do we go about it? How do we go about it? Again, for instance, in Latin America, one of the things they are pushing for is that they need more, participation of women. They need more participation of women. On our own continent also, that is another thing that we are pushing for. I mean, women should participate more. And I was told of late that in the diocese in Machakos, we even have more women catechists than men. As a way of doing what? Of responding to main challenges of our context. And so after the very first stage where people, discussed they listened to one another at the level of the community, at the level of the diocese, at the level of the parish, and all of that. Now it moved to the level of the continent, the second stage, the journey so far. The third stage, we now moved at the level of the continent, even now to the first session of the synodal process, the one that took place last year. And this document did not shy away from saying, we released a synthesis report, therefore this working document shouldn't even start referring back to it. They already know it. No. This document went back to do what? To outline, to reiterate some of the things that happened in the first session. The first, what was done was to sieve out what is heard and to discern directions, to discern paths for the future. And so one of those things was to compose 10 different groups handling 10 teams. You see? And so they first sift out what they've heard. It means what? Again, at this third level, which is at the level of the first session of the 16th Ordinary General Assembly of the Synod of Bishops, they also started like how it started initially. That is, they started with listening. You listen, and then you try to sieve out what you have heard, and then you plot a direction for the future. You discern this direction. And two, another thing that came out of this first session of the Synod is what to promote a further consultation of the local churches. That is, let us go back again. Let us hear again more. This time around, for depth. As we always say in English, that repetition is the mother of all learning. So we are not just going to, just to repeat what we've been saying this time around. The repetition is to let us go, deep, profoundly into the matters. And then it is to identify the paths to follow and the tools to adopt in different contexts. Here again, context is being, taken seriously, and in circumstances to enhance the unique contribution of each baptized person and each church in the one mission. And so here again, it isn't just about, okay, now we've gathered as bishops in Rome, we've heard them, therefore we are sending them our decisions. No, it is about now listening and taking seriously the unique contributions of each person and each church. Each person and each church. Where now inculturation can really become alive. And then, again, it's about reflection on the concrete forms of the missionary commitment to express the dynamism between unity and diversity proper to a synodal church. And so, what do we do? What have they done so far? It is to give us the opportunity to express our differences, our diversity, but also to kind of watch and discern how this diversity, how they merge at the level of faith, which I've mentioned, and at the level of mission. Is this particular difference, is it helping to fulfill the mission of the church? Is this particular way of being, this uniqueness of this particular context, is it really professing the faith in the Trinitarian God? You see, so it's a way of looking at unity in diversity, and also to provide a clear focus for the work of the second session. So, as I said, this third level shows that there will be a continuity. And so synodality isn't just come together and agree. No, it is a continuous process. It is a continuum. And so this first synod that took place last year also helped to provide directions for the one that is to come. And that is why now the fourth level so far, so the first we said regarding the synodal process so far, the first started in local churches, communities, and all of those. The second moved to the continental level. The third moved to the Synod of Bishops that took place last year in Rome. Now, the fourth is exactly what we are about today, the drafting of the instrumental laboris for the second session. For the second session. So that will be now the fourth level. And this is to tell us really that the church has now become a discerning church. To move from 1 to 4 tells us that the church has become a discerning church, not a church, that imposes, not a dictating church. But a first step was what? The consequence of the third level. That is, these instrumental laboris had to look at what happened, previously. And what did we see? The fruit of several voices. So this document acknowledges the fact that whatever it is that will come, that we're going to read in this document, they are fruits of several voices. And these voices are not just ecclesial actors or agents. No, they are voices of, social agents. That is the world out there, the larger society. How will, for instance, the street children, how will they want the church to be? What will be their expectations from the church? So, again, of course, ecclesial agents and actors, the bishops, the priests, the religious consecrated people, lay faithful. But again, scholars. Scholars were also, we hear the voices of scholars. Also leadership and followership. All of these, we hear their voices. And this collective voice, according to this document, tells us about just one desire. The church has to move forward. The church has to move forward. But then the question is, how do we move forward? And this document tells us or gives us few ways of proceeding. The first is to engage in conversation in the Spirit. Conversation in the Spirit. Again, we should get to the point, like in the Acts of Apostles, like the early disciples, we should get to that point where we shall say, we and the Holy Spirit have decided. And for us to do that, it means we have to listen to one another. And dialogue, open dialogue, and discern with one another. And the second way of proceeding will be what? Consultation, dialogue, discernment, and decision making. Consultation, dialogue, discernment, and decision making. So it means what? This whole process should lead us to consult one another, and it must be now a natural way of life, a way of being. Dialogue, in the cases where there are, differences. Again, discern what will be the best way out. But after discernment, we should come to a point of saying, this is our decision. We and the Holy Spirit, we have decided. And this must be done at every level. And then again, one of the things we see is what? The great awareness of the value of local churches and their journeys and the need for their voices to be heard. This particular document paid attention to that and captured that from the first session of the Synod of Bishops that took place last year. That was, we have to take local churches now seriously, because they are not to be viewed and treated any monk simply as recipients of the gospel with nothing or very little to contribute. A synodal church is basically calling us to be the church on mission. So local churches are not just recipients of the gospel. They are also what? They are also propagating the gospel. They also express the faith. And so we shouldn't just lock them in that box of those who receive. They also have the capacity, they have the capability also to give, also to proclaim the gospel. And that means what? We have to take them very seriously to see if what they are giving out also is in line with the mission of the church and with the faith that we profess. And so this particular first consideration, consider the consequences, I would say, of or the certain decisions of the third level, which is the first session of the synod. Another stage or another step taken to produce this document or other things they considered, one of them is the international meeting of parish priests. So you want a synodal church, you need to talk to people at the very first, those who are call them the first contact with faith, the parish priests. And here, the first thing that happened was to understand and appreciate the unique backgrounds of these parish priests. Their context, again, going back to context. And here, there is also that call to understand the role of parish priests in the context of synodality. Yes, we say the parish priest is the bishop of his parish. We hear that often. And you even hear some parish priests say, that bishop cannot, even the bishop cannot come to my parish to come and say mass without my permission. Some parish priests they are known for bragging with that, So, but the fact is this: how should we be parish priests in the context of synodality? Will a parish priest still be the Alpha and the Omega when it comes to decision making in the parish? Or is going to be synodal? That is, the people will be involved. And not just involved passively, but they will be involved actively. So, these are some of the things. And then the concern about not being able to reach the peripheries and those who live on the margins. And they are also saying if the church wants to be synodal, it must listen to these people. And so here already we are seeing the problem of mission. Yes, they are parish priests, but they are also saying now to the church, there are places we are not able to reach. And then we always have this mentality that, mass begins when the parish priest arrives. So there's no particular time for mass. It's only when the priest arrives that mass will begin. But we have to evangelize these people in the peripheries. So what does that mean? Should we begin to have station worship leaders, service leaders, district leaders, that even when the priest cannot get to a particular place, they will lead the people in prayer? Should we start having that as a proper structure rather than just personal initiatives? And so in composing this working document, in composing this instrumentum laboris, it wasn't just, okay, what was said in the last synod, the first session of the synod, let's just use that and then we compose this working document. No, they also had to pay attention to what the parish priests were saying in their own meeting. And not just that alone, there's also another level, another stage, a third one, which was really the ingenuity of the general secretariat of the synod. That is, to compose a 5 working group to look at some of the issues being raised. So first, they didn't just consider what brought about this document. First would be, say, the synthesis report of the first session. Second, we will say the meeting of the parish priest for the synod. And third will be again this 5 working group composed or set up by the General Secretariat of the Synod. What is the composition of these groups? Composed of bishops, of priests, of religious men and women, laymen and women, theologians, canonists, biblical scholars, and from all continents with different roles in the church. Again, a wider consultation, just to hear what the Spirit is saying. No one is left out. And these 5 working groups are mandated to deepen the theological and canonical reflections on the meaning of synodality. So what does synodality mean theologically? What does it mean canonically? What will be the implication pastorally? What will be the implication for the life of the church, that is pastorally? So when we say this is ingrained in the canon law, how will it be felt by the ordinary Christians? When we say this is a dogma, is a theological dogma, this is the dogma, what does it mean for our mamas and our fathers in the villages? So this group is mandated to really unflesh, to bring about the synergy from theology and canon law to pastoral reality. So there must be a synergy. And again, these groups are meant to interpret the contributions and materials received and compiled answers to the guiding questions from the first session of the Synod that took place last year. And so again, you see that continuity. And you see, they are also to give answers to certain questions. Of course, they may not be able to answer all questions, but to give answers to certain questions. The fourth step in drafting these instrumental laboratories is the role of the 10 study groups in analyzing also 10 themes emerging from the synthesis report. So they are supposed to pick one after the other different questions or themes that came up, and they are to deal with them squarely. There are still other steps, as I mentioned. So, for instance, the General Secretariat of the Synod would have to promote the implementation of the synodal recommendation as approved by the Pope. Again, there is also this whole consideration of setting up, you see, a legislative, a canon law commission to look at the matters that would come up. And as I've mentioned earlier, second, people from our continent, now our continent is saying, also give us the opportunity to discern the theological and pastoral implication of polygamy. And they had to gather all of these, and all of these were put together to now write or to compose these instrumental laboratories. And so we can already tell that this isn't just a one-man thing, it is the entire church. Now, the fourth part of the introduction talks basically about the expectation now of the second session. Okay, what is expected? So, they are first to evaluate the lessons learned so far. So, which is characterized by silence, prayer, listening, the word of God, and all of evaluation of that. The second will be that though difficult, the people of God have matured. So they have to recognize that fact. They have matured into a deeper awareness of the vertical and horizontal relationships. So the people of God, before this synodal process, have, they've grown. They have grown. And that is the truth. we have grown to understand the very nature of the church, synodal. And again, now the second session is expected to pay attention to certain leading questions. How can the identity of the synodal people of God in mission take concrete form? It's very important. Again, they have to move from the original question of the first synod, that is, how does a synodal church describe itself? Now we've got answers. We already know the answers now, how we can describe ourselves, starting even from the first word of this instrumentum laboris, that is, using the analogy, the imagery of Isaiah, the imagery of the mountain and the festivity. So we know what it means. We know how to depict ourselves now as a synodal church. But the major question that will be asked and should be answered in the second session is how to be a synodal church in mission. How to be a synodal church in mission. And so we are expecting that this second synod should give answer to how to be a synodal church in mission. Again, we must understand that the instrumentum laboris is not a document now of the magisterium of the church. From all I've mentioned about drafting this instrumentum laboris, these 4 steps that I've mentioned, perhaps there are more, but at least I've singled out 4. So it tells us that this instrumentum laboris is not a document of the magisterium, nor the report of a sociological survey whereby we just do social, how we just go out to collect data. No, it isn't that. It is first, it presents first the foundational understanding and awareness of synodality that has matured along the way and approved in the first synod. That is what this document is about, to help us see that we have matured in our understanding of synodality. And 2, it illuminates the missionary synodal life of the church. Again, as I mentioned, synodality is for mission. It is not a goal in itself. It is a means to attain, mission, to be committed to mission and to hold on, to profess our faith. And so we see now that it illuminates the missionary synodal life of the church from different perspectives, that is the vertical and horizontal relationship, more profound than structures. So we see now that our relationship with God, our relationship with one another is more profound than just structures. Just looking only at the hierarchy. No, it should be first a relational church before an hierarchical church. And second is to see that now this instrumentum laboris gives us also pathways that support the dynamisms of ecclesial relationship. That is, how should we relate with one another? How should we relate with one another? How should religious relate with the clergy? How should the hierarchy of the church relate with the laity? How should men and women relate? We see that also in this synodal, this instrumentum laboris. And the first one, which is the vertical and the horizontal relationship, will now be treated squarely in that first part on relations. This second part on pathways that supports, dynamisms of ecclesial relationship will be treated in the second part that talks about pathways. And then the third part, which talks about places, or tangible context marked by variety, will be treated in the third part of this document, which we will see next month. So those 3 parts basically are outlined here. And why should we focus more on places and tangible context? Why? It is to help us understand our plurality. It is to help us understand that despite this plurality, we are interconnected. And as I said, our interconnectedness is rooted in the one faith, one mission, so that we don't fall into the temptation of abstract universalism. So when we say, I believe in the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, what do we mean by one? The one should be at the level, we should understand that oneness from the perspective of faith, from the perspective of mission. So the faith, our mission gives us that universal identity, that oneness. But the expressions of faith might differ. The expressions of faith may differ. We should understand that. And this document is leading us to that point. So, further expectations now will be why this session cannot answer all the questions, and we must understand that this session will not answer all the questions because there are many and they are complex. But at least the session will deepen our shared understanding of synodality. That is, this session must come out with ways, with clear directions on how to feel, belong in the church. To also better focus on the practices of the synodal church. That is, what are the things we should be doing as a church for us to say we are synodal? And then propose some changes in canon law. So some things will have to change in canon law. Issue of polygamy, understanding of marriage, for instance, from the African perspective, the church as the people of God, some of these things must be rooted also in legislative norms. And so far we have experienced and learned a method for addressing questions together. That is a major gain so far. It's a major gain so far. Addressing even difficult questions together. And so if I'm to summarize the introduction, you see, so far we've been talking about the introduction alone. We've not even entered the main document, paragraph by paragraph. So if I'm to talk about, or to give a summary of the introduction, which also basically leads us into the document and tells us what the document is about, three things are glaring. First, broader consultation. Broader consultation, a wider consultation. So it tells us that the church really has matured to become synodal. Gone are the days when we would then say the Pope has declared or the Pope has said it. Today, we can now say the Pope is a listening Pope. Rome is a listening church. Wider consultation. The second thing that is also obvious, which we also see all through this document, is the prominence or the important place given to context. Given to context. Very important. And then human and divine experience. So what is our own personal experience or collective experience of the divine? Are we free enough? Can we be allowed to express that? Can we be allowed to express that? What is our experience, our life experience with one another? What is our context saying? How important is our context? And what are we learning from our context? And then the third, openness to listen to others. That is, I'm not just fixated, I'm not just, looking at my context alone, I am not just basing myself on my experience alone, but they say knowledge is not just out of personal experience. Knowledge is also collective experience, or even the experiences of others. And we get to that knowledge only when we are open. And so when you look at the introduction, telling us about what synodality is all about in general, telling us the processes that have taken place so far, telling us about also what we should or we may expect of the second session of the synod that is coming up in a few months' time. We just see that very crucial in all of these is the place of consultation, the taking into consideration of context and experiences, and the openness to listen to others. That will be the understanding of the introduction of the Instrumentum Laboris. Before now, we now move to the document itself, paragraph by paragraph. That is, which begins, of course, with foundations, and we will end with foundations today. The next time we will look at relations, which is the part 1. We look at pathway, which is the part 2, and then we look at places, which is the part 3. Before I proceed with foundations now, I don't know if we have questions, contributions, suggestions, or something to say about the introduction of this document. Please feel free to do so. Let me stop sharing for now so that we can talk to each other, at least for a few minutes before we move to the next part.
Thank you, Father Stephen, for that elaborate introduction. All this time I've just been listening to introduction to the Synod, the introduction. You can imagine now the content, how it will be. As Father has requested, if anybody has a question, anything for clarification, I see Sister Adelaide's hand is already up. Please, the floor is yours. Welcome, Sister Adelaide.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Father, for that wonderful introductory part of the Instrumentum Laboris. Probably the question I would want to ask maybe probably answered in the coming chapters, probably, but let me just ask just in case. When
have your video on, Adelaide, please.
My video? Yes, please.
Yes. Have it on.
I don't know, I'm not able to put, I'll check what the problem is. I think there's some issues. Sorry for that. I'll work on it. Yeah, so my question is that it seems Christians could have forgotten all about Synod and Synodality and what it's all about. At the initial stage, the first stage, they were really involved and they contributed greatly. But after the Synod, they used to call Synod of Fathers, after the members that went for the Synod in Rome, you find that our Christians are really not informed or don't know exactly what's the outcome or what the church is all about. And I think this forum, this training for us is very, very important because we are the communicators. And as media personnel, church media personnel, I think we can pick it up. And it's only when we are informed that we are able to pick it up. And we are really grateful for this. So that even my presenters here at the radio station will say, we don't know what is happening. My sisters in the convent will say, we don't know what is happening. So I'm like, if this can say like that, what of the ordinary mama in the village there and my papa in the village there. So I'm happy that this is happening so that we can understand and we can pick it up and probably have conduct programs or near programs on the same, and also have a little bit of some social media postings in our social media platforms. Thank you very much. That's my contribution.
Thank you very much, sister. I think you're really on point. That is why you're here. That is why you're here, so that you can disseminate. The documents, also what synodality is all about. And I must say, you have a lot. This group, you have a lot, really, to do, because your place is very important in this process. Very important in the sense that those peripheries, for instance, that the parish priests were mentioning that they couldn't get to, I'm very sure they have a radio station or something, and at least they pick one or two radio stations there. And if you are able to pass things on synodality through radio or internet or something, even if they don't have internet, they have radio, they follow FM. Even if they don't have TV, some of them have radio. One of the things I always ask myself is this: how come we talk about peripheries when it has to do with missions or serious things in life? But when it comes to, for instance, elections, we don't hear about peripheries. There is no ungoverned space because politicians know how to get there, have their agents in order to get votes. Perhaps that would be the mission of those I'm speaking with today. That would be your own contribution to this process. If politicians could go to the thickest forest where people are living just to get their votes, then if we are media people, I think we can do more to pass the faith and to ensure that the mission of the church continues. And so really that's why we are here, sister. You are already on point, on the spot. That's why we are here, so that we can pass this to our Christians, to everyone. It is not just the process of the synodal fathers anymore, it is still our process. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Father. Asasha, I see your hand is up. Kindly.
Hello, everyone. I'm not sure about the time differences, so allow me just to use hello or habari. And thank you very much, Father Stephen, for taking us through the preamble of this important document, Instrumentum Laboris. And as I was preparing to join this training session, I reflected on the different themes that are addressed vis-a-vis our role as communicators in the church. In June and part of July, I was honored to be part of a group of young Catholic journalists who convened in Rome for close to 2 weeks just to get some training on apologetics, a little bit of theology, and of course, how to go about contemporary challenges of communication. And looking at this document, while I was interacting with some of the people, especially from the West world, and those countries that are known to be the fertile or budding ground of faith, there seems to be something like a vocational crisis, which I call, or for lack of a better word, let me just use vocational crisis. And case in point, in Germany, a friend of mine from Germany was saying that they're forced to attend Mass fortnightly because they only have one priest. And this priest has to attend to over 1,500 faithful, so he has to travel all the way. And then there's that a trend of an exodus from the Catholic faith. So this calls for very strong apologetics to try and defend the faith and to win over others to work together with them, because this is the call of Synod for synodality, not leaving no one behind and working together, incorporating everyone and every voices, regardless of their demographic differences. So that's my first question. How best do we handle this, given that there are some cases that pop up in the church? We are communicators and we are faced with this dilemma of to report or not to report, and how much of damage it's going to create when we do this, because we want, of course, to be on the positive side and to influence the people positively to work us together towards the evangelization. My other question is linked on the summary of broader consultation, prominence of contexts, and human divine experiences, as well as openness to listening to others. The Catholic Church is hierarchical in nature. I think we all understand that. And by doing this, like trying to bring all people together and listening to them, providing an ear, means that we are trying to blur these boundaries which have existed for so long. So how practical is this? And given that we are the people who bridge between those who are in the grassroots levels and those in the higher ranks in the church, how do we draw the line, and how best do we actualize this or blur these rank boundaries? Thank you.
Thank you very much, my sister, Sasha. Thank you very much. Thank you. And these are very important points you've raised. The first, I mean, it's obvious the Western world is facing vocation crisis now. Okay, that is obvious. Christianity is not what it used to be in the Western world. But you see, I personally have a different view in understanding what is going on in the West, especially the country you mentioned, Germany, a context that I know very well, a context in which I have lived, you see, in the German world. Let us first understand the facts in this particular world that they do not have enough priests, or they don't let me use the word enough. They don't have many priests as they used to be, as they used to have in the past. So, first premise, okay? They do not have, many priests as in the past, number one. Number two, they have more churches than priests. Do you understand? They have more churches. And so, what can we do to mitigate this? They are suggesting one way. Can you give us the power also to continue to talk to our people? Just as you are saying, as media practitioners, can we also convey the faith? That is an option. That is an option. A very good one for that matter. But again, it will require people also to plan. And this is where we learn from one another. You see, this is where we learn from one another. Take the African setting, for instance. A parish can have about, say, 5,000 parishioners. And you have just a priest and an assistant to attend to all of them. You see, what do? We have no choice than to have a big church that will accommodate all of these people for worship. Okay? And then the pastoral aspect will go to their homes and other places to minister to them. In this particular world, the crisis comes from the fact that you have small churches. So within a kilometer, you could have, at the distance of 1 kilometer, you could have like 3 churches. Do you understand? So, and then you have just one priest serving about 10 churches. But when you look at the space, maybe it's just a distance of 3 kilometers with 10 churches. And you have a priest serving all of them. And when you look at the population, perhaps maybe you're talking of maybe 800, 1,000 people. This is where we need to dialogue and learn from other contexts. Is it possible? Rather than the Christians saying, no, we are glued to our own small church, is it possible really to have 2-3 masses on a Sunday in 2-3 big churches, whereby all the Christians will come together? Remember the beginning of this document in the introduction, the image we given. It is the image of the mountain and the image of festivity, banquets. We gather to feast. And the Holy Mass, even according to Vatican II, is first. a community commitment, but also a moment to feast. The Mass is meant to be a feast. So why do I want to have Mass in only 2, 3, 4 persons in this small church, and then I wouldn't want to take just 1 month, 1 kilometer walk or drive to go to a place where all of us will gather as a community and will celebrate a feast. So perhaps this is something they can also learn from other contexts. But is there a problem of vocation there? That is undeniable. It is true. It is true. And this is why we need a synodal church, to learn from the experiences of others. How can we then maybe pick what is working in another place? Another thing that they could also do is, if you say that you have vocations in Africa, initially they will do vocation in Africa when they have vocations, and they sent missionaries here, isn't it? And they also be open to take missionaries from Africa and other parts of the world to evangelize them, or to continue the mission of Christ in that context. These are things we need to talk about, we need to dialogue about, we need to be open, to. And this way, then we can handle the situations going on there. You see. But then another way you've mentioned is to empower media practitioners to have, series of, call it emissions on the faith. And if I know well, or if I understand the whole situation well, they have some Catholic radios actually, like Radio Maria, which every now and then they are talking about the Catholic faith. That is another way that you can understand that context. But again, there's something I noticed in the German world, and I give them kudos for this. Although there are not, there are very few people going to worship in the church. From my own personal experience while I was there, I feel they have taken the worship of God out of the church and placed on the streets. In the sense that some of the things you go to the church to learn, they are practicing them already, even on the streets. You see? And that way, Christianity, even though it's not in its fullest, but there is a part of Christianity that is the lex vivendi, our living of the faith, that is still very active in that world. And I really give them kudos for that. So what we are complaining about now is the lex orandi, that is, we coming to pray together as a people, but living out the fruit of our prayers. I see that really on the streets in that world. And so really it's just about consultation, learning from people's experiences, and then to consolidate your own. The second thing you raised, we are going to talk about it when we talk about the foundations. That is how practical it is for openness, consultation, and listening to one another. Paying attention to context. Between the hierarchy and what will be the role of the hierarchy when it comes to consultation? How practicable is that? We're going to look at this when we start talking about the foundations, and you will see it clearly there. So please, because of time, permit me not to address this particular question now, so that I don't repeat myself again. Thank you for understanding.
Okay, thank you, Father. Thank you for the response. I now want to request you, because I've seen 3 hands up, can all of them just ask the question so that you respond at once?
Sure.
If that is okay for you. Okay, I see Dol, I see Valentine, and then I saw Sarah. So please, in that order, let's ask the question, then Father will respond to them at once. So Dol, Valentine, then Sarah. Then Angelo as well. Thank you.
Can you unmute yourself, please?
Unmute, please.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Father, from South Sudan, Diocese of Gombe. My question is very short, Father. I am asking about what you said before about the sacrament of matrimony in the church. As you realize nowadays, those who are mostly active in the church are the people who are not married in the church, where you find maybe the husband have 2, 3, 4 wives. And you see sometimes all of them, they are the most active in the church than the married couples. So sometimes there are some questions that, especially the side of the women, that me myself, I do not have 2 husbands, I have only 1 husband. It is my husband who has another wife. Why I am blocked not to receive the Holy Communion and all these things. So I don't know, what can you say about such a question? Number 2 is going to the media houses, like the radio, the TV, and all the other platforms. You see, the books, it is using theoretical time. And this theoretical time, it is very difficult for some people who are working in the radio stations to understand them, so that they can be able to deliver to the Christian in the ground and all these things. Because not everybody who is studying theology actually. And that is why it becomes very hard for them to pass the message to the other people, to Christian to hear it. So I would rather suggest, if it will be good, that at least the translation should be done in the simple, that everybody can be able to deliver the message in the media houses. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Valentin?
Hello, everyone. I wanted to find out at what point will the people get to learn if there are submissions at general level, at national level, were, of course, considered or not. I'm talking about feedback from the early stages of Synod on Synodality, because there were submissions gotten from parish level up to national level. So just in terms of feedback. Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah?
Mine were suggestions, and I think we shall have time to give our suggestions.
Okay. Angelo?
Hello, my name is Angelo. I am a Jesuit priest, director of Radio Kwizera. Sorry, I'm in a car driving, so I can't put my camera on. If you can be...
Oh, we are not getting you. We are not hearing you, Father. Father Angelo. Okay, Father Stephen, you can go ahead and respond to.
I'll call it a concern about Msova. Are you able to hear me now?
Yeah,
Are you able to hear me? Sorry.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm in a car, I'm driving. I'm building a sub radio station in the village in Kigoma, so I'm buying materials. I'm sorry. My question was about the concerns on synod and synodality in terms of some of the challenges. When you were talking about instrumentum laboris working document for the upcoming synod in October, one of the things that was ringing in my mind to say just as a concern is about the experience in the parishes Christians have with the parish priest or
We can't hear you again.
priests in terms of clerical master and the author of everything. You know, they have nothing to say extra. And that's really a very, very big challenge. I, for one, have worked in a parish, and being at a radio station here, I worked with multiple parishes. And in some places, like when we go to record, let us say, a small Christian community activity, let's say they're praying or they want to get their voice in the radio, they will say, no, the parish priest has not authorized. And even when you reach out to get permission from the parish priest, for whatever reason, sometimes the parish priest will just play down and say another time. So you find the issue of clericalism is really a big, big issue, especially for Christians, to a point that, you know, having a dialogue and having a conversation becomes an issue. I liked one part of where you talked about the church as a mission, where we talk about the contribution of every baptized Christian, every Christian and every church. If we're to have a conversation, that still remains by and large really an issue. In some places, it's a very big success, where the church, for example, the parish is run by a team of pastoral counselors and a team, let's say. But in some places, the whole management or running of the mission, including even planning of things, is rested in the hands of the priest, and the Christians are like observers. So it's not really a question. I just wanted to share that the practical experience have been observed in some places in Kenya. Now I'm working in Tanzania, I've observed. I have seen it in Sudan. I've been from Uganda. I've seen this even my own home parish, where the parish priest decided all the burials he has to do himself. If he's not there, there's no burial taking place. So some of these things really, I don't know at what level can be discussed, but it's about, more to do with the individual personalities and perspectives. I just wanted to share that in my own experience. Thank you.
Luntha Television stands as an autonomous faith-based broadcaster with a national and international reach. Experience the difference with Luntha Television, where innovation meets experience. Our dedicated team, backed by cutting-edge technology, ensures seamless execution and unparalleled results. Luntha guarantees credibility and professionalism in all its endeavors and services. We offer, among this, production and broadcasting of jingles, music videos, narratives, documentaries, express services and programs on location or outside, live broadcasting of mass and other church functions, government or indoor functions, and political rallies, creation and broadcasting of special programs, sponsored content, sports and entertainment, and advertising for small, medium and large enterprises. All services are offered at competitive prices. Tune in daily to catch Luntha Television on Zuko on Channel 51, Starsat Channel 474, Star Times channel 474, Topstar 474, Kriye 007, GoTV on channel 807, Azam on channel 386, and live streams on our YouTube and Facebook platforms. You can find us in Area 2 Lilongwe or can reach us on 0883 815 055. Come, let us help you grow your business. Luntha Television stands as an autonomous faith-based broadcaster with a national and international reach. Experience the difference with Luntha Television, where innovation meets experience. Our dedicated team, backed by cutting-edge technology, ensures seamless execution and unparalleled results. Luntha guarantees credibility and professionalism in all its endeavors and services. We offer, among this, production and broadcasting of jingles, music videos, narratives, documentaries, press services and programs on location or outside, live broadcasting of mass and other church functions, government or NGO functions, and political rallies, creation and broadcasting of special programs, sponsored content, sports and entertainment, and advertising for small, medium, and large enterprises. All services are offered at competitive prices. Tune in daily to catch Luntha Television on Zuko on channel 51, Starsat channel 474, Star Times channel 474, Topstar 474, Kriye 007, GoTV on channel 807, Azam on channel 386, and live streams on our YouTube and Facebook platforms. You can find us in Area 2 Lilongwe or can reach us on 0883 815 055. Come, let us help you grow your business. Luntha Television stands as an autonomous faith-based broadcaster with a national and international reach. Experience the difference with Luntha Television, where innovation meets experience. Our dedicated team, backed by cutting-edge technology, ensures seamless execution and unparalleled results. Luntha guarantees credibility and professionalism in all its endeavors and services. We offer, among this, production and broadcasting of jingles, music videos, narratives, documentaries,
into, the ordinary, call it the lay person's language, you see. So when we are talking about, for instance, Trinity, how do you explain it to someone who hasn't gone to school, you see? When you use the term, for instance, Immaculate Conception, how do you break it down for someone to understand? This is why we need ongoing theological formation to help us also understand some of these terms very well. So for instance, synodality, it sounds so big and difficult, but immediately you say, we live together, we work together, tuko pamoja, as we say. I mean, they will understand what you're talking about. You see, so these are the things important for us to better help our people out there when we give them the feedback or we want to inform them about what is going on. I think I want to leave it here with the questions.
I guess so. I think all those who had questions have asked. And so we stop the questions there and we give you opportunity to proceed.
You said you give us the opportunity for?
To move to, you want to do something on foundation.
Okay, yes. Thank you very much. So let me share my screen again for this other part. Good. So, the document, this working document talks about foundations, and it did so in 5 layers, The first is really to understand what this whole thing on foundation is about. And the major question here, as I mentioned earlier, that this second session will be asking will be how to be a synodal church in mission. Because now we know synodality is for mission. So how can we be a synodal church in mission? The goal here in this particular part is to outline the foundations of a missionary synodal church for a deepened understanding of the mystery of the church. So the whole idea of understanding really
Press services and programs on location or outside live broadcasting of mass and other church functions, government or indoor functions and political rallies, creation and broadcasting of special programs, sponsored content, sports and entertainment, and advertising for small, medium and large enterprises. All services are offered at competitive prices. Tune in daily to catch Luntha television on Zuko on channel 51, Starsat channel 474, Star Times channel 474, Topstar 474, Kriye 007, GoTV on channel 807, Azam on channel 386, and live streams on our YouTube and Facebook platforms. You can find us in Area 2 Lilongwe or can reach us on 0883 815 055. Come, let us help you grow your business. Luntha Television stands as an autonomous faith-based broadcaster